We knew about them before the New York Times did, and we passed on them. What Paul just said, we really believe. We believe this is the inflection point. This is the real transformative change that's going to happen in higher education, because it's redefining what the degree means. MOOC is essentially a transmission model. It's a pretty interesting transmission model, by the way, and I think its greatest value is that it has opened the minds of people in the country broadly to the idea that you can deliver higher education in a very different way. What they're doing isn't new. In fact, there's been for-profit institutions that have been doing that for a while. It's the fact that it's these elite brands doing it that really was what got the attention. But ultimately, I think the transformation of learning and how that transformation of learning is going to change what the credentials mean, that's what competency-based learning is all about. And that's where I think the great potential economically and socially really comes from that. We're sort of past our time, but I know I saw some more hands, so go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, let's go ahead for another 5 minutes or so.
I don't want people to feel obligated to hear us yet.
Sorry, I know the focus is on higher education,
Yes.
but there's a huge issue with just high school graduation rates and not even capturing that population. So you already have this large percentage falling off the radar before they can even get into a great program like you have at SPIN. Do you see, is there a discussion, is there any movement forward to shift into a more assessment-based model of evaluation versus kind of what we exist now?
So there's two really big things. The first is competency-based learning is actually taking place in K-12. So that's an important fact to know, that they've been doing it in some different ways than what we've been doing in higher education. But this is not a new idea for them either. Actually, 3 points. The second point is that I think one of the things that's hard for people to wrap their heads around is that right now in the country today, we could actually increase the graduation rate in our high schools to 100%, send all those students to college, and you still wouldn't get to the 60% goal that Lumina Foundation has set for the country by 2025. And the reason for that is that that population isn't as big as the cohorts that have come before them. So part of our higher educational challenge is to focus as much on what happens after high school as getting them ready from high school. In other words, the high school degree is getting them to the starting line. The finish line is a post-secondary education, including all those adults I mentioned, for whom the economy has fundamentally changed their work life. The third thing is that the part that's missing from the equation, in my opinion, is that we've got these really interesting changes going on in K-12 education. Everybody's read about the Common Core now and what's going on with the Common Core. And you've got things like competency-based learning, the degree qualifications profile, another thing going on in higher education. But there hasn't been nearly enough conversation about aligning those two things. And our historic misalignment between our K-12 and our higher education system could get worse unless we seriously think about how we're going to align that. Part of the problem with the Common Core, I'm a huge Common Core supporter, so I just want you to know that. Part of the problem with the Common Core is that they forgot to ask Paul whether or not what they were doing is actually preparing students for college. It's literally designed to make students college and career ready. But they really never ask the people in higher education, does this fit in terms of your admissions, your placement standards, all the rest? That's something that's now got to be retrofitted or we're going to be in big trouble. Because I think this reform in K-12 is real.
So yeah, just Karen, one other thing that's sort of interesting is we're piloting in a number of other settings. So one is at the Met School in Providence, Rhode Island, where they actually have spent the summer mapping our competencies against their curriculum and making changes, and we'll have the first, I think, 30 kids go through. And this is, I don't know if you know about the Met School, it's one of the most inspiring high schools in America. Their hope is to have 30 kids graduate from high school with associate's degrees. Right? These are really, really poor kids. And the president, in his speech, opened up the possibility of Pell Grant money in high school for dual enrollment, because we couldn't figure out how to pay for it. Now that actually would open up the door for paying for it. We're also piloting it in Rwanda. We have a pilot program.
Let's do one last question.
So the latest national news, of course, is Obama's rating system for universities and colleges. There's criticism already, and yet the details really aren't out there. Sounds like this is, you know, almost an opportunity, what you guys are talking about, for if we are going to have a rating system, to sort of get in on what that could mean. And I guess I'm wondering, you know, do you think the administration has any idea? Are they in tune with what's going on with what you're doing at your school with the research at Lumina?
So they gave themselves 18 months to develop the rating system. That was a good idea because they don't have it right now. That's a fact. You know, I'll say a couple things about the rating system. And by the way, it is a rating system, not a ranking system. And this sounds like, you know, we're sort of splitting hairs here. But the idea behind a rating system is that you essentially categorize institutions based on whatever your description is of their ability. Presumably, the rating system will be about production of learning outcomes. That's certainly what people like Paul and I hope. But that'll be key. But it is literally not going to be like U.S. News. Number 22 is now number 23 and vice versa. They're going to come up with some sort of system that essentially says, you know, prepared, you know, moderately prepared, not well prepared. Something like that is what I think they're going to come up with. The second is the harder thing to say in this context, which is that I think a rating system may already be an idea which is in the rearview mirror, in the sense that I think where we're moving is towards a system where what the most important thing that we get out of higher education, besides the research capacity of those research universities and some other things, is learning. And the learning that is represented in the degrees that we produce is the most important thing that we produce. That learning is measured at the level of the student, not the institution. That's what ultimately matters the most. So I think what we're going to have to confront here is our understanding of the fact that the whole system is shifting to be student-centered, to be outcomes, competency, learning-based, and away from this idea that where you went to school is really the only thing you have as a proxy for understanding what the learning is. Doesn't mean that the institution's importance is going to go away. As I said before, schools like Bates have an opportunity to really distinguish themselves because of the way they already do it and the way that they can show that they add value beyond that. But the point is that if this is sort of a scale, the scale is shifting more towards the student and less towards from the institution. And we might, a decade or two from now, wonder, what was that funny idea that President Obama had about a rating system that seems very outdated?
So I'm only add this, Catherine. I'm actually a supporter, and most of my colleagues are not. There's a huge blowback from lobbyists in the industry. We're in an industry that has steadfastly defended any sort of accountability and transparency and accountability, except in the places where our life depends on it. So your doctor has to sort of pass medical boards, your nurse has to, your accountant has to pass a CPA, your engineer has to be, right? So the places where our life matters, we sort of say, wait a minute, I'm not sure that's good enough that you went to that pretty good school over there. I'd like to have a little more reassurance before you open me up. And I think we can do this, but the devil's always in the details. And I worry about, so here's my basic principle of metrics. Hold me accountable for the things I can control, not what I can't. So when the president says, one of the things we want to know is what your graduates, how your graduates do in terms of finding jobs. It's like, great. Hold me accountable for the part that says, you know, this is the skills they need, they're aligned, they're what employers are looking for, and let me hold you accountable for making jobs. Because I can't create jobs, I can't find graduate jobs if jobs don't exist, and we're still in that, right? So I think there is a work this out, but what all we're getting from my colleagues, for the most part, not all, but mostly, is sort of pushback, and I think, you know, I'd love to find some colleagues that said, let us be proactive in saying back to the Department of Education, here's what we'd like to measure. Like I would like to have, we do a lot with predictive analytics. We know every student who enrolls with us online, we have a score, and we wrap services around that student at various levels. It's based on all sorts of regression analysis on who's been successful and who's not. We've been driving up our persistence rates. So let me sort of measure how much value I add. Because my friend who heads up the Heart Institute at Catholic Medical Center in Manchester, New Hampshire will tell you that their medical scores are routinely lower than many other state hospitals because they take the sickest heart patients. Right? And just this week, Johns Hopkins, often rated #1 or #2 in the country in terms of hospitals, was ranked, I think, 24th or 25th in a state ranking of hospitals in Maryland. Why? Because they take the sickest people. So what you measure matters, and you will skew behavior. So I think our industry needs to be much more accountable, much more transparent, proactive in this debate as opposed to just fending it off.
Thank you very much. Anything debate minimal on it back in your home, but a small gift.
Besides you too, in my case.
And in your case, we're going to change that, and we hope it's the beginning of your involvement with the debates, not the end.
Thank you.
And so please, we've got a little more time, sort of informally, if you wanted to come up with some more questions or chit-chat among yourselves. There's still some more dirts back there, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And class of '86 members, we're going to try getting a quick photo with this.